Arizona Territory, 1878. The merciless sun beat down on the town of Copper Springs, a dusty settlement perched between the punishing desert and the looming mountains that promised fortune to those brave or foolish enough to seek it. Marshal James Keller shifted uncomfortably in his saddle as he guided his chestnut mare along the outskirts of town. At 52, the years of frontier justice had etched deep lines into his weathered face and streaked his once dark hair with silver. His reputation as a fair but uncompromising lawman had kept the peace in Copper Springs for 8 years, but the arrival of the railway last spring had brought a new breed of trouble. Wealthy Eastern investors, desperate prospectors, and the usual assortment of gamblers and outlaws now mingled with the established ranchers and merchants, creating tensions that threatened to boil over with each passing day. Would you kindly subscribe to our channel? We'd love to know which city you're watching from. Keller's attention was drawn to a small group gathered near Fletcher's General Store. At the center stood a woman unlike any other in Copper Springs. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking her as Apache. She wore a blend of traditional dress and settler clothing, a long skirt of deep indigo with intricate beadwork at the hem, a white cotton blouse, and a leather vest adorned with symbols Keller couldn't decipher. Her straight black hair was pulled back, revealing high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. The townspeople maintained a wary distance as she examined goods outside the store, the storekeeper himself hovering nervously nearby. Keller had heard rumors of her. Nailin, they called her. Some said she was a healer who lived in the foothills. Others claimed she was a scout who had worked with the cavalry before striking out on her own. What was certain was that her occasional appearances in town always stirred unease and whispers. The marshal dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post in front of his office. His deputy, young William Taylor, emerged from inside, his boyish face bright with excitement. "Marshal, heard about the stage coming in tomorrow? Bringing some big-shot mine investor from Chicago. Man by the name of Harrington." Taylor was barely 22, eager and green, but showing promise if he could keep his hot head cool when it counted. Keller nodded slowly, taking off his hat to wipe the sweat from his brow. "Mr. Harrington's arrival is precisely what has me worried, Will. Samuel Pierce has been trying to buy up every claim around here, and I don't imagine he'll take kindly to competition." Pierce had arrived 6 months earlier with seemingly endless funds and ruthless ambition, establishing himself as the owner of the largest saloon in town and quietly acquiring mining interests throughout the region. Inside his office, Keller reviewed the wanted posters that had arrived on yesterday's mail coach. One in particular caught his eye: a man called Thomas Blackwood, wanted for the murder of 3 men in a land dispute in Texas. The sketch showed a square-jawed man with cold eyes, and the description mentioned a distinctive scar running from his right temple to his jaw. Keller pinned it to the board, making a mental note to keep watch for anyone matching that description. The territory was vast, and men like Blackwood often sought new beginnings in places where questions weren't asked. As the afternoon stretched on, Keller completed his rounds through town. He broke up a heated argument at the Silver Dollar Saloon, checked on Mrs. Wilson, who had reported a prowler the previous night, and discussed water rights with a group of frustrated farmers whose access to the creek had been mysteriously obstructed. By evening, the temperature had dropped, bringing blessed relief to the parched town. Keller sat on the porch of his modest cabin at the edge of town, nursing a cup of coffee as he watched the last light fade from the rugged landscape. His thoughts drifted to Elizabeth, his wife of 20 years, who had succumbed to fever during their journey west. He still spoke to her sometimes, in the quiet of evenings like this, telling her about his day and the strange turns his life had taken. The solitude of his position weighed on him, but he had found purpose in upholding the law in this wild country. Tomorrow would bring new challenges with the arrival of Harrington and whatever schemes Pierce might be planning. Keller knew from long experience that trouble was brewing. He could sense it as surely as he could smell rain in the air hours before a storm broke over the mountains. The stagecoach rolled into Copper Springs shortly after noon the following day, its 6 horses lathered with sweat as it came to a halt in front of the Grand Hotel. A small crowd had gathered to witness the arrival of Edward Harrington, rumored to represent one of the largest mining consortiums in the East. Keller observed from across the street as a tall, well-dressed man in his 40s descended from the coach, his expensive suit immediately marking him as an outsider in the frontier town. Harrington was followed by a younger man who carried himself with the vigilant posture of a hired gun, though he wore his weapon discreetly. The investor surveyed the dusty main street with an expression that blended distaste and calculation, before being ushered into the hotel by the eager proprietor. Keller made a note to pay Harrington a visit later. Newcomers with money often needed to be reminded about local laws and customs. As the crowd dispersed, Keller noticed Nayland again, this time speaking with an elderly Mexican woman who ran the town's small apothecary. Their conversation appealed earnest, with the older woman gesturing emphatically toward the mountains. When they finished, Nayland caught Keller watching her. Instead of looking away, she held his gaze for a long moment before giving him a slight nod of acknowledgement. There was something in her eyes that suggested she knew far more about the town's affairs than an occasional visitor should. Keller returned the nod, curious about what business brought her to Copper Springs with increasing frequency. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas Reed, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the territory, and a man with significant influence in the community. Reed's weathered face was creased with concern as he approached the marshal. "Keller, we need to talk," Reed said, his voice low and urgent. "Pierce's men have been pressuring my hands to sell their stakes in the foothills. 3 of my boys were jumped last night on their way back from town." Keller frowned at this news. The discovery of copper deposits in the hills had led to many of the local ranch hands staking small claims in their spare time, hoping for a windfall. "Anyone hurt bad?" he asked, already mentally preparing to confront Pierce. "Davy Wilson's got a broken arm, others just bruised. They didn't see faces, but we all know who was behind it." Reed's weathered hands clenched into fists. "I've got 40 years in this territory, Marshal. I won't be pushed out by some city slicker with dirty money." Keller placed a steadying hand on the rancher's shoulder. "I'll handle it, Thomas. Gather your men and tell them to stay alert, but not to take matters into their own hands. That's my job." As evening approached, Keller made his way to the Copper Palace, Pierce's opulent saloon that stood in stark contrast to the simple structures surrounding it. The interior was awash with light from ornate oil lamps. The bar, made of polished mahogany, imported at great expense. Samuel Pierce himself sat at a corner table, deep in conversation with 2 men Keller recognized as his enforcers, brothers named Harris, with reputations for efficient brutality. Pierce looked up as the marshal approached, his thin lips forming a smile that never reached his eyes. "Marshal Keller, what a pleasant surprise. Care to join me for a drink?" His voice carried the refined accent of an educated Easterner, though rumors suggested he had left Philadelphia one step ahead of the law. "Just here to have a word, Pierce," Keller replied, remaining standing. "Heard there was trouble with some of Reed's men last night." Pierce's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened. "I can't be responsible for every drunken brawl in this town, Marshal. Perhaps Reed should encourage his men to be more careful about where they drink." The tension between the two men was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby patrons who quietly shifted to observe the exchange. Keller leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "Let me be clear, Pierce. I know what game you're playing, buying up claims and pressuring those who won't sell. This isn't Chicago or New York. Out here, we settle things differently." Pierce's smile faltered for just a moment before returning. "Is that a threat, Marshal?" Keller straightened up, adjusting his hat. "Just a reminder of where you are. If Reed's men suffer any more accidents, you and I will have a much less pleasant conversation." As Keller turned to leave, he noticed a new face at the bar, a square-jawed man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, watching the exchange with cold, calculating eyes. Thomas Blackwood had arrived in Copper Springs, and the timing couldn't have been worse. The following morning brought news that set the town buzzing. Edward Harrington had been seen riding out at dawn with Nayland as his guide, reportedly to examine mining prospects in the northern foothills. Pierce was said to be furious, having planned to escort the investor himself to claims he controlled. Keller pondered this development as he shared a simple breakfast with Deputy Taylor at the town's only cafe. "Strange choice, isn't it?" Taylor remarked, between mouthfuls of eggs. "Eastern gentleman trusting an Apache woman to guide him through those hills." Keller considered this, recalling the intelligent assessment in Nayland's eyes. "Maybe not so strange. She knows those mountains better than most, and I'd wager she has no stake in the claims Pierce is pushing." The deputy nodded thoughtfully. "Still, folks are talking. Some say she's leading him to a secret deposit the tribes have known about for generations." Keller dismissed this as typical frontier speculation, but he was concerned about how Pierce would react to being outmaneuvered. His worries were justified when, shortly after noon, one of Pierce's men was seen riding hard out of town in the direction Harrington and Nayland had taken. "Keep an eye on the Copper Palace," Keller instructed Taylor. "I'm going to follow our friend and make sure everyone returns to town safely." The marshal saddled his horse and set out, following the trail north into increasingly rugged terrain. The path wound through narrow passes and dry creek beds, the landscape shifting from desert scrub to pine-dotted slopes as he gained elevation. After an hour's ride, Keller spotted hoofprints leaving the main trail, heading toward a box canyon known locally as the Devil's Pocket. He guided his mare carefully, alert for any sign of an ambush. The sound of voices led him to a clearing where he discovered Harrington, Nayland, and surprisingly, Thomas Reed, engaged in what appeared to be an intense negotiation. Nearby stood the investor's bodyguard, vigilantly scanning their surroundings. Keller approached openly, his hand deliberately away from his sidearm. All eyes turned to him as he entered the clearing. "Quite the meeting you've arranged," he commented, noting with interest that Nayland showed no surprise at his arrival. Harrington stepped forward, extending his hand. "Marshal Keller, I presume. Your reputation precedes you. We were just discussing a rather interesting business proposition. Reed looked uncomfortable but determined. The Apache tribes know these mountains better than any of us, Marshal. Nayland has shown us copper deposits that make Pierce's claims look worthless. Deposits on land that doesn't appear in any territorial record. Nayland spoke then, her voice clear and measured, with just a hint of an accent. This land has belonged to my people for generations. The government maps do not show it because they do not wish to acknowledge our claims, but I know where the boundaries lie. She gestured to the surrounding hills. What we propose is a partnership. Mr. Harrington provides capital. Mr. Reed provides local knowledge and workers. My people provide access and receive fair payment for resources taken from our ancestral lands. The plan was audacious, essentially creating a mining operation that circumvented Pierce's monopolistic ambitions, while acknowledging native land rights in a way the federal government refused to do. Keller rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Pierce won't take this lying down, and I'm not sure how legal any of this is. Harrington smiled thinly. That's why we're discussing it out here, Marshal, rather than in your office where official ears might hear. Sometimes justice and law don't perfectly align in these territories, as I'm sure you've discovered. Before Keller could respond, the crack of a rifle shot echoed through the canyon. The investor's bodyguard crumpled to the ground as everyone else dove for cover. Keller pulled his revolver, scanning the ridgeline where the shot had come from. Pierce's man, he muttered, spotting movement among the rocks above. He must have followed me here. Another shot kicked up dirt near Reed, who had taken shelter behind a boulder. Nayland moved with surprising speed to a position with better cover, drawing a knife from her boot. There are two of them, she said calmly. One on the ridge and another circling to the east. Her assessment proved accurate when a second shooter opened fire from a different angle, pinning them down in a deadly crossfire. Keller managed to return fire, forcing the ridge shooter to duck back. We need to move before they get reinforcements, he shouted to the others. Harrington looked terrified, unused to frontier violence, despite his bodyguard's protection. What do you suggest, Marshal? He called from behind a fallen log, his fine suit now covered in dust. Nayland pointed to a narrow ravine to their right. That leads to a cave system. We can lose them there and circle back to our horses. Keller nodded, having learned to respect local knowledge over the years. I'll cover you. Go in pairs. Reed, take Harrington first. As the rancher and investor made a dash for the ravine, Keller provided covering fire. Once they were safely underway, he turned to Nayland. Your turn. I'll be right behind you. She gave him an appraising look. We move together, Marshal. I did not survive this long by trusting men with guns to watch my back. There was something in her direct gaze that brooked no argument, and Keller found himself nodding in agreement. They made their break for the ravine together, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. As they reached the shelter of the narrow passage, Keller felt a sharp pain in his side, but kept moving. Once inside the cool shadows of the ravine, they caught up with Reed and Harrington. Everyone all right? Keller asked, pressing a hand to his side and finding it came away bloody. You're hit, Nayland observed, moving to examine the wound. Not deep, the bullet grazed you. She tore a strip of cloth from her skirt and bound it tightly around his ribs. This will hold until we reach safety. Her hands were sure and steady, her touch clinical, yet somehow comforting. Keller was struck by the calm competence she displayed in the face of danger. a quality he had learned to value above all others in the unforgiving territory. Nayland led them through the twisting ravine to a cave entrance partially hidden by scrub brush. "We will wait here until nightfall," she decided. "They will not find this place, and in darkness, we can return to our horses unseen." As they settled into the cool dimness of the cave, Harrington seemed to regain his composure. "This changes things," he said grimly. "Pierce has shown his hand. Attempted murder is a line I didn't expect him to cross so quickly." Reed spat disgustedly. "You don't know Pierce. Man's been running roughshod over this territory since he arrived. This isn't his first violence, just the first aimed at someone important enough for people to care." Keller leaned against the cave wall, the pain in his side a dull throb. "Pierce must have had Blackwood following me. Professional killer I've been tracking. This complicates matters." Nayland had been examining the cave entrance, but turned at Keller's words. "Blackwood? The man with the scar?" When Keller nodded, she continued, "I saw him in town 3 days ago, speaking with Pierce's men. He watches you, Marshal." This information sent Keller's mind racing. If Blackwood had been in town that long and was working with Pierce, what else might they be planning? The revelation that he himself might be a target changed the stakes considerably. As daylight began to fade outside the cave, Nayland shared water from her canteen and some dried meat she carried. The unlikely group ate in silence, each contemplating the dangerous situation they found themselves in. After they had eaten, Harrington approached Nayland, his earlier fear replaced by curious respect. "May I ask how you came to know these mountains so well, Miss Nayland?" Her expression remained impassive, but she answered after a moment's consideration. "I was raised in these hills. My father was an Apache warrior who fought the Bluecoats until the reservation system broke his spirit. My mother was taken from a Mexican settlement as a child and raised among our people. I learned the old ways from both of them, and the new ways by watching the white settlements grow." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a statement of fact. "When the Army wanted scouts who knew the territory, I served them for 3 years. I learned their language, their ways of thinking. When they no longer needed me, I returned to these mountains." Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "And now you seek to use white men's greed to benefit your people. A clever strategy." A ghost of a smile touched Nayland's lips. "The land will outlast all of us, Mr. Harrington. The question is whether my people will survive to see it." As darkness fell, Nayland led them out of the cave and through a circuitous route back to where they had left their horses. To Keller's relief, the animals remained undisturbed. "Pierce's men must have returned to town to report to their boss," Reed surmised as they mounted up. "They'll be waiting for us." Keller adjusted himself painfully in the saddle, his wound protesting the movement. "We'll approach from the east, through the old creek bed. It'll give us cover almost to the edge of town." Harrington looked uncertain. "And then what? Pierce has proven he's willing to kill. My man is dead, and the rest of us nearly joined him." Keller's expression hardened. "Then we end this. Pierce has crossed the line, and he'll answer for it." The investor nodded, seemingly reassured by the marshal's determination. "My company has considerable influence with territorial officials. If you can secure evidence of Pierce's crimes, I can ensure it reaches the right people." The ride back to Copper Springs was tense, each rider alert for any sign of ambush. Nayland rode at the front, her knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable as she guided them through paths that would have been invisible to the others in the darkness. Keller watched her with growing admiration. She navigated this precarious situation, caught between two worlds, trusted by neither, with a dignity and purpose that spoke to deep reserves of inner strength. As they approached the outskirts of town, Keller outlined his plan. Reed, take Harrington to your ranch. It's defensible, and your men are loyal. Nayland and I will head to town. I need to find Deputy Taylor and assess the situation. Reed looked concerned. You're injured, James. And no offense to the lady, but walking into town with an Apache woman at a time like this might not be the wisest move. Nayland's expression remained neutral, but Keller detected a flicker of something, perhaps amusement, in her eyes. Mr. Reed speaks wisely, Marshal. Perhaps I should approach from another direction. Keller shook his head firmly. You've saved our lives today. I won't have you skulking around like a criminal. Besides, I may need your eyes. You notice things others miss. His decision made, they parted ways at the edge of town, Reed and Harrington heading for the safety of the ranch, while Keller and Nayland made their way cautiously toward the marshal's office. The town seemed unnaturally quiet for early evening, with few people on the streets and an atmosphere of tension hanging in the air. Keller's office was dark, with no sign of Deputy Taylor. Something's wrong, Keller muttered, drawing his revolver as they approached the building. His instinct proved correct. The door to the office stood slightly ajar, and when they entered, they found Taylor tied to a chair, his face bloody, but his eyes alert. Marshal, he croaked as Keller quickly cut him free. Pierce's men. They've taken over the town. Blackwood's with them. They're holding several townspeople at the Copper Palace as insurance against your return. Keller helped the young deputy to a chair, while Nayland fetched water. How many men does Pierce have? Taylor took a grateful swallow of water before answering. At least 10, all armed. They're saying you killed Harrington and Reed over a mining dispute. Pierce is presenting himself as the voice of order. The deputy's eyes widened as he noticed Nayland for the first time. The Apache woman. They're looking for her too, saying she led you all into an ambush. Keller's jaw tightened at the audacity of Pierce's lies. He's turned everything around, making himself the hero while painting us as the villains. Nayland stood by the window, scanning the darkened streets. This is a story often told, she said quietly. My people know it well. The truth matters less than who has the power to shape what others believe. Her words struck Keller with their simple wisdom. This was indeed the way of the world, but he had spent his life fighting against such injustice. We need to free the hostages and expose Pierce for what he is, he stated, checking his ammunition. Taylor looked between them, his youthful face determined despite his injuries. I managed to hide the keys to the jail cells before they got me. Thought they might try to free some of their friends. This small victory gave Keller an idea. Taylor, can you make it to Reed's ranch? Tell him and Harrington what's happened, and bring back as many men as Reed can spare. The deputy nodded, though his movement was clearly painful. What will you do, Marshal? Keller exchanged a glance with Nayland, who seemed to understand his thinking without words. We're going to turn the tables on Pierce. If he wants to control the story, we'll give him something new to talk about. After Taylor had slipped out the back door to find a horse, Keller outlined his plan to Nayland. It was risky and depended heavily on her cooperation, but she listened without interruption. When he finished, she considered for a long moment before giving a single nod. It may work if your deputy returns in time. If not, we will likely die. Her directness was refreshing in a land where men often hid their fears behind bravado. As they prepared to put their plan into action, Keller found himself studying Nalen's profile in the dim lamplight. Why did you return to these mountains after serving as a scout? You could have gone elsewhere, started a new life, away from the troubles between your people and mine. She continued checking the knife she had retrieved from her boot, her movements precise and practiced. These mountains are in my blood, Marshal. My ancestors' bones rest in this soil. Would you abandon your home because others claimed it was now theirs? She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Besides, I have purpose here. I help my people navigate the new world that has been forced upon them. I heal those who need healing, guide those who need guidance. There was a quiet pride in her voice that commanded respect. They moved through the back streets of Copper Springs, keeping to the shadows as they approached the Copper Palace from the rear. Through the windows, they could see Pierce holding court at his usual table, Blackwood standing menacingly nearby. A group of townspeople, including the mayor and several prominent business owners, were gathered in one corner under the watch of armed guards. Keller and Nalen slipped into the storehouse behind the saloon, where they found a surprising ally, the bartender, a man named Lewis, who had served in the army with Keller years earlier. "Pierce killed my brother in Denver," Lewis whispered, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. "Been waiting for a chance to bring him down." With Lewis's help, they learned the exact positions of Pierce's men and formulated the final details of their plan. "When you hear the commotion out front, that's your cue," Keller told Lewis, who nodded grimly before returning to his post. Nalen touched Keller's arm before they separated. "Be careful, Marshal. Men like Pierce and Blackwood fight without honor." The concern in her eyes stirred something in Keller that he hadn't felt in a long time. "You two, meet me at the appointed place, and not a moment later." She disappeared into the darkness with the silence of someone who had spent a lifetime moving unseen through dangerous territory. Keller circled around to the front of the town, where he had instructed Taylor to bring Reed's men when they arrived. To his relief, he found not only Reed's ranch hands, but also a group of miners and farmers who had suffered under Pierce's expanding control. Reed himself stepped forward as Keller approached. "Harrington's safe at the ranch, writing telegrams to every official he knows. What's the plan?" Keller quickly assigned positions, sending armed men to surround the Copper Palace, while others took up stations at strategic points throughout town. "When you hear my signal, 3 shots in rapid succession. Move in from all sides. But remember, there are innocent people inside. Make each shot count." As the men dispersed to their positions, Reed handed Keller a spare revolver. "Taylor told us about your wound. You sure you're up to this?" Keller checked the weapon and tucked it into his belt. "I've been shot worse and ridden farther, Thomas. Besides, I've got help." With a nod toward the prearranged meeting spot, Keller set off to join Nalen for the most dangerous part of their plan. She was waiting exactly where they had agreed, a shadow among shadows. "Reed's men," she asked simply. "In position," Keller confirmed. "Ready?" She moved closer, reaching up to adjust his collar in a gesture that might look intimate to anyone watching from a distance. "I am ready, James Keller." It was the first time she had used his given name, and it caught him off guard. "You should know that if we succeed tonight, Pierce will not be the only one who loses. My people's secret will be revealed. The copper deposits will draw more settlers, more miners." Keller hadn't considered this aspect fully, and the realization of what she was sacrificing gave him pause. "We could find another way," he offered, But she shook her head. The secret would not remain hidden for long. Better to control how it is revealed, to ensure my people benefit rather than suffer more loss. Her wisdom and pragmatism impressed him once again. You are a remarkable woman, Nayland. She offered a rare smile in response. And you are not what I expected in a white lawman, James Keller. They walked openly down the main street toward the Copper Palace, Keller's arm around Nayland's waist as if they were lovers returning from an evening tryst. The ruse was designed to get them close to the saloon without raising immediate alarm. A marshal apparently seduced by an exotic Apache woman would be the subject of gossip, not suspicion. As they approached, one of Pierce's men stepped forward from the shadows of the porch. "Well, look what we have here," he sneered, his hand moving to his gun. "Boss has been looking for both of you." Keller kept his expression neutral. "Then he'll be pleased to see us. We're coming in peacefully." The guard looked suspicious, but ultimately motioned them toward the door. "Hands where I can see them. No sudden moves." They entered the brightly lit saloon, every eye turning in their direction as conversation died away. Samuel Pierce rose slowly from his table, his face a mask of controlled rage. "Marshal Keller, how kind of you to deliver yourself and your accomplice directly into my hands." Blackwood moved to stand beside Pierce, his scarred face twisted in a cruel smile. "Told you he'd come for the hostages, Pierce. Man's got a soft heart. It'll be his undoing." Keller surveyed the room calmly, noting the positions of Pierce's men and the condition of the hostages. None appeared to be injured, though they looked frightened. "I hear you've been spreading stories about me, Pierce. Thought I should come set the record straight." Pierce gestured to two of his men. "Search them." The guards roughly patted them down, taking Keller's visible revolver, but missing the second weapon hidden at the small of his back, thanks to Nayland's earlier adjustment of his coat. They didn't find Nayland's knife, which she had concealed in a way Keller thought better not to contemplate. "Where are Reed and Harrington?" Pierce demanded once the search was complete. "Dead in the hills? Or have you hidden them somewhere?" Keller maintained an impassive expression. "They're safe, which is more than I can say for you once the territorial marshal arrives. I sent a telegraph this morning about your attempted murder of an Eastern investor." It was a bluff, but Pierce's momentary flicker of uncertainty suggested it had hit home. Nayland spoke then, her voice carrying clearly through the tense room. "Mr. Pierce fears what we discovered in the mountains. The copper deposits there make his claims worthless." Pierce's face reddened with anger. "Shut her up," he snapped at Blackwood, who moved menacingly toward Nayland. Keller stepped between them. "Touch her, and it'll be the last mistake you make, Blackwood." The standoff held for a tense moment before Pierce laughed coldly. "Bold words from a man without a gun, Marshal." He gestured around the room. "I have 10 armed men. The town is under my control. You have nothing." Keller smiled then, a smile that had made more than one outlaw reconsider his choices over the years. "I have the truth, Pierce, and I have her." He nodded toward Nayland, who had moved subtly into position near the bar. "She's the reason Harrington chose to partner with Reed instead of you. She's the key to the richest copper deposits in the territory." Pierce's attention shifted fully to Nayland, his greed overtaking his caution. "Is that so?" he said, moving toward her with renewed interest. "Perhaps we should discuss a new arrangement, my dear. Your people, my money. We could make quite a profitable partnership." Nayland's expression remained carefully neutral as Pierce approached her. "You would partner with an Apache?" she asked, her tone suggesting skepticism. Pierce stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to meet his gaze. "I'm a businessman, my dear. I don't care if you're Apache, Mexican, or Chinese. If you can lead me to those deposits, you'll be well rewarded." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made Keller's hand itch for his hidden gun, but he maintained his position, waiting for the right moment. Nayland held Pierce's gaze steadily. "And what of Marshal Keller and the others you've taken hostage?" Pierce waved his hand dismissively. "Business complications. Nothing for you to worry about." Nayland tilted her head slightly, as if considering the offer. "You wish me to betray those who treated me with respect? For a man who speaks of murder as a business complication?" Pierce's facade of civility slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Don't play games with me, woman. You have two choices: work with me and prosper, or die with your friend the Marshal." Nayland's expression changed then, a slow smile spreading across her face that seemed to unsettle Pierce despite himself. "There is a third choice," she said softly. Pierce frowned. "And what might that be?" Nayland's smile deepened as she looked directly into his eyes. "I can't take my eyes off you," she said in a tone that made several of Pierce's men shift uncomfortably. The unexpected seduction attempt seemed to both confuse and please Pierce, who smiled arrogantly. "Well, many women find power attractive, my dear." Nayland continued to hold his gaze. "Kneel," she said simply. Pierce blinked in surprise. "What did you say?" "I said kneel," Nayland repeated, her voice taking on a commanding quality that seemed at odds with her position as a captive. Pierce laughed incredulously. "I don't kneel for anyone, especially not—" His words cut off as Keller's signal, 3 rapid shots fired through an open window by one of Reed's men positioned outside, shattered the tense scene. In the moment of confusion that followed, Keller drew his hidden revolver while Nayland pulled Pierce down, using his body as a shield as Reed's men burst through the doors and windows. Blackwood reacted with the speed of a professional killer, raising his gun toward Keller. But the Marshal was faster. His bullet caught Blackwood square in the chest, sending him crashing backward through the bar's mirror, in a shower of glass. The battle that followed was brief but intense, with Pierce's men finding themselves caught in a crossfire between Keller inside and Reed's men at every entrance. When the shooting stopped, 4 of Pierce's men lay dead, including Blackwood. The others had surrendered, their weapons on the floor and their hands raised. Pierce himself was still held firmly by Nayland, her concealed knife now visible at his throat. "It's over, Pierce," Keller announced, moving to free the hostages as Reed and his men secured the remaining gunmen. "Your empire ends tonight." Pierce's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over, Keller. I have connections, people who will make you regret this." Keller holstered his weapon and approached Pierce, stopping directly in front of him. Without warning, he delivered a solid punch to Pierce's jaw, sending the man sprawling to the floor. "That's for Deputy Taylor," he said calmly. "And for the record, I've been regretting not doing that since the day you arrived in my town." The following days brought significant changes to Copper Springs. Edward Harrington, true to his word, used his connections to expedite an investigation into Pierce's activities. The evidence was overwhelming. Not only the attempted murders in the mountains and the hostage-taking in town, but also financial records found in Pierce's office that revealed a pattern of fraud, extortion, and even connections to unsolved murders in other territories. Pierce and his surviving men were transported to the territorial capital under heavy guard to await trial. Thomas Reed organized a town meeting where a new agreement was proposed. A partnership between the settlers of Copper Springs, Harrington's mining consortium, and representatives of the local Apache bands, negotiated with Nayland's help. The arrangement was unprecedented in the territory, acknowledging native land claims while establishing legal protections for all parties involved. Marshal Keller stood on the porch of his office, watching as Nayland spoke with a group of Apache elders who had come to town for the negotiations. The events of the past week had transformed the town's perception of her. Where once she had been viewed with suspicion and fear, now many regarded her with respect, even admiration. The wound in Keller's side was healing well, thanks in part to a poultice Nayland had prepared for him. As he observed her confident interaction with both the elders and the town officials, he reflected on the remarkable strength she had demonstrated throughout their ordeal. When the meeting concluded, Nayland noticed him watching and made her way across the street to where he stood. "The agreements are nearly complete," she informed him. "Harrington has proven surprisingly honorable for a man of such wealth." Keller nodded, shifting to ease the pressure on his healing wound. "What will you do now? Your role as intermediary between your people and the town will change things for you." Nayland considered the question, looking out over the bustling main street of Copper Springs. "I will continue to walk between two worlds, as I always have, but perhaps with a different purpose now." She turned to face him directly. "And you, Marshal? Will you remain now that peace has returned to your town?" Keller hadn't given much thought to his future. For 8 years, his identity had been inextricably tied to his role as Copper Springs lawman. The crisis with Pierce had reminded him of both his strengths and his limitations. He wasn't getting any younger, and the wound in his side would not be the last he would sustain if he continued in his current path. "I haven't decided," he admitted. "This badge has been my life for a long time. Not sure what I'd be without it." Nayland's expression softened slightly. "A man is more than his role, James Keller, just as I am more than what others see when they look at me." The wisdom in her words resonated with him. Perhaps there was truth in what she said. Perhaps there was more to him than the silver star he wore, more life to be lived beyond the confines of his duty. "Would you consider showing me more of those mountains of yours someday?" he asked, surprising himself with the invitation. "There must be wonders there I've never seen." A slow smile spread across Nayland's face, genuine and warm. "The mountains have many secrets, Marshal. Some worth knowing, others best left undisturbed." She held his gaze for a long moment. "But yes, I would consider it." As the sun began to set over Copper Springs, casting long shadows down the main street, Keller and Nayland stood in comfortable silence, watching as the town settled into its evening routines. The future held uncertainty for both of them. New relationships between settlers and native peoples. New economic developments with the mining operations. New personal possibilities neither had anticipated. But for the moment, there was a sense of rightness in the air, a feeling that justice had been served and a better path forward had been found. Keller glanced at the woman beside him, this remarkable person who moved between worlds with such grace and courage. "Thank you," he said simply. Nayland nodded, understanding the depth of what remained unspoken between them. "We have both fought for what is right, in our own ways," she replied. "Perhaps now we can build something new." As darkness fell over the frontier town, both knew that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them with the strength and wisdom they had found in each other. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.